Okay, good evening. It is 3 minutes after 7 p.m. This is the Village of Tivoli Board of Trustees. It's June 10th, and we are still conducting our meetings remotely. This meeting is being live streamed on YouTube with help from Panda, our local public access. And the Village Board is here, and we are also joined by Tivoli Fire Chief Mark Hildenbrand, Peter Sweeney of PSA Studios, and Christine Shaw, Village Attorney. And I believe we will be joined by the Deputy Mayor in a few moments. We have a number of things to do tonight, so let's just relax and proceed through them. It's been an incredibly busy week in the village. While we have the Fire Chief, and Mark, if you would turn your mic on, please. We have a power stretcher to be formally bid, and we have put together the bid specs, and there were a couple blanks in the bid documents that Chris Shaw prepared for us. I talked with Mark, so Chris, I just want to tell you what we came up with for those two blanks and make sure we're all good with that. So we would like to do the shortest bid period. Am I correct? That's 5 days. So that blank would be 5 days from whenever it's in the paper. Is that correct? All right. And the second blank, we feel 30 days is our number for the period once the bidder is told that they got the bid to give us their to complete the project.
So it's a readily available item. It's not special construction or anything.
Nope. And it's actually, once we order it, where the ambulance is being built, it's going to get shipped right there anyway.
Great.
So when it gets here, we're done. We're not installing anything.
Great.
Right. So this is a power stretcher. The Village of Tivoli borrowed money some months ago to pay for this. And it's an expensive item. And we are following our procurement policy, and for items purchases at this threshold, which let's say tens of thousands of dollars, we do a formal bid. And so that's what we'll be starting. I expect we will get that in the papers tomorrow, as well as send it directly to several vendors that we know of. Anything else on that, Christine, we need to cover?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, and any board action related to that will be when it comes back.
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna authorize the purchase once you get the bid. So you might want to, whenever you do that, schedule a special if you want to do it before July 8th, when your next workshop is.
Very good, thank you. So the next until 7:30, hopefully, when Mark leaves, or perhaps beyond, the Village of Tivoli hired Peter Sweeney and PSA Studios to do preliminary design work on an expanded Tivoli firehouse. And that's been going on since last winter. It was a large task. Our goals were to have detailed enough design work done that we knew with some degree of accuracy how much money it would cost us to do. And I would like to, Peter gave this to us a while ago. Quickly, we've noticed that we're going to need some help digesting and understanding the product. So I want to thank Peter Sweeney for being here tonight. And Peter, if you would, maybe just sort of give the Board of Trustees, just introduce us to what you've produced for us, and maybe take us through it a little bit. And I'm sure the trustees will have some questions in a bit, but for now, yeah, you have the floor, please.
Okay. Thanks, Joel. And yes, it seems like a lifetime ago that we started this, certainly pre-COVID. So lots happened in the intervening time. But I don't know how much do you want me to go through? Because I can screen share, walk people through the documents quickly.
Yeah, if you could start with the scope of your project that we gave you, I think that would be good. And then maybe some, a screenshot of the elevation, certainly. And then, I think where the board will really benefit from having you with us tonight is to go through the numbers and where they came from.
Yeah. Yeah, we were retained by the village after doing some preliminary feasibility design consulting with the village and with the fire department. And there were kind of two components to what we produced and what the village was looking for. Actually, three. The first was to develop the design a little bit further through conversation with Mark and his team and the village, and we developed the design to what I would call a sort of schematic design level. So from that, the village needed to generate, in order to fundraise and to proceed, with a kind of full understanding of what the scope of the project is, a fairly responsible estimate for the construction. So we worked with Crawford Engineering, who in conjunction with our architectural work generated some structural, civil, electric, plumbing, sprinkler, scope of work drawings, which in conjunction with ours, which maybe you've seen or haven't seen, but was sufficient for us to go out and generate what I think was a very detailed estimate of construction. We can jump into the numbers later. This all needs to be prefaced that the world is a little bit different today than it was when we put the estimate together, but we worked with Slocum Consulting to generate that as well. We went back and forth and reviewed that with the with Mark and Joel, and I can go into that in more detail. The other piece of it that we were retained to look at was what are the zoning limitations? Are we in compliance? We wanted to make sure that what we were putting together wasn't going to run up against any issues when it came time for site plan review. This was all premised on the idea of having the parcel rezoned, which is separate, somewhat separate situation. But we did go through that. Did a sort of what I would call a kind of zoning site plan review to confirm that there were no kind of issues that we'd be bumping up against. And in fact, I think as long as the zoning change takes effect, we'll be fully in compliance. So those were the three pieces of the work that we were retained to look at. The result we submitted, I guess, about a month ago, 6 weeks ago, maybe. Full set of schematic, architectural, and engineering drawings, along with the estimate. So do you want me to run through the drawings at all, or are we?
Yeah, let's go through them.
So if it's all
You
right,
want to spend 3 to 5 minutes, or
well, what I'll do is I'll literally skim through them, because I think I'm assuming you shared them to some extent. But if anybody has any questions and wants to slow me down and ask further questions, we can. So I'll just share my screen if that's all right. Oh, I can't.
Please do share your screen. That's great.
Yeah, but I need you to allow me to do that.
Can I also make a request that if you're not actively speaking, can we just mute ourselves to eliminate some of the background noise so it's a little easier to get Peter's information, please?
Yep. Joel, are you there? I think you muted yourself.
Okay, I'm on.
You need to give me permission to share my screen.
Oh, gee. Do I know
If
how to
you
do
go-
that?
Yeah, where it says share screen, there should be a little
Yeah.
arrow to the right.
Yep. How do I give you permission, or do I have to do it?
You have to do it, but you should, if you go, there's a little arrow next to share screen that points up. And
Yep.
if you hold that, it should say allow other people to
It says multiple participants.
Yeah,
Participants can share.
that's it. So if you can click on that, that would be good.
Yeah.
There we go. So can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Okay, good. So I'm going to just scroll through this fairly quickly. This is our cover sheet, but obviously the elevation that we ended up with after multiple iterations. So just to give you a feel for the set, we went through code analysis, and again, it doesn't sound like I have a lot of time, so just jump in if you have questions. Code analysis was all fine, and part of the scope of work that we're looking at was the fire doors, which are in now, so everybody should be familiar with that. But then this is the new plan. I won't go into detail, but basically this area is the new addition. This is the existing. There's substantial work in the existing firehouse, and obviously all of the addition is brand new. So 2-story structure. We talked about the program many times. This is the new roof. This is a slightly more detailed elevation that we've generated of the building. Again, this is the new addition. This is the existing firehouse. We spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to dress up the existing facade, and if we can come back and talk about that in more detail, but I think we're feeling fairly good about sort of what we've been able to do with that. These are the other elevations, secondary ones, the back elevation. We're required to put in an elevator lift. ADA requires that, and that's part of the scope of work. Again, I won't go into all the details, but just to say that we looked at interior elevations, building sections. Again, more details. These were some preliminary perspectives. I think those have been shown around. Site work, civil work. Crawford put this parcel map together, which with Chris Shaw is I guess part of the rezoning exercise. So that was part of the scope of work that we ended up doing. Site plan, talking about the new paving, parking areas. Again, we can talk in detail about that if we want to. So really what we ended up doing was generating a kind of scope of work set of drawings without detailing everything, which would come in a subsequent subsequent development of the drawings. We called out for foundation, structural plan. We generated a preliminary schematic for what the structural system would be, what the roof framing, roof structure would be. Likewise, a strategy for heating and cooling, and not just for the new addition, but also for the existing building. So general lighting specifications, and what else? Plumbing. Part of the project is bathroom renovations in the existing firehouse, and then finally sprinkler plans. We'll be required to not only sprinkler the existing building, but because of all the different uses that we're proposing in the project, we're going to have to sprinkler the existing firehouse as well. So that's like a very quick, and I apologize it's so quick, but please feel free in terms of the drawings to ask any questions about that. It sounded to me like the intent was probably more to talk about the numbers. So let me pull that up. But once we go through all of it, so this is the estimate. As I said, I wanted to kind of talk about or say that this all came off the press right as, the COVID was, we were in lockdown mode. And I think the last meeting that we had was 10 or 12 feet apart with everybody. And I talked with the team about these estimates, and everybody was pretty clear that, that there's definitely some, some potential shift in things that may happen as a result of this. I don't think anybody knows what they are, but that's just a sort of preface to the numbers, just so you understand it. This was all based on prevailing wage and an appropriate level of detail and finish is described in our project. There are a bunch of things that are included in here that sort of ratchet the number up quite significantly, which I think are really safety kind of, safety numbers. The 10 and 10 overhead and profit, and is probably potentially generous. Likewise, the escalation might be. Design contingency is a percentage that it gets tacked on depending on what phase of the design process we're in. So because we're just in schematic, to cover contingencies, they add 10%. To be honest, we're probably further along in that. I think that's a little bit heavy. But, those are, it's easy for us to, to adjust, say that those could be adjusted. But the fact is, this is how it came off the press. And we talked through the scope of work on the new edition. And I think, for the most part, there's not a lot of play in that, but we could, if the numbers are critical, eliminate some scope of work in that. This covers pretty much like full build out, fit out, finish on both floors, including the upper floors with the conference room, command center. It has a pretty reasonable level of finish throughout. On all of it, the pieces that and that number to me seems pretty reasonable. I mean, just based on my experience, the number that was jumping out as being a little bit, I won't say a surprise, but adding to the total in a way is the extent of the work on the existing building. And you can see the number. A lot of that work is. Is that we're completely residing, recladding the existing building. We've developed a detail throughout where we've got a base of stone veneer. I mean, the things that obviously we could peel off, but I think the direction was to kind of get a number for what the desired end result is. And so that's what this number represents. It also represents bringing in the new sprinklers, redoing all the bathrooms, and replacing all of the existing windows. And then site work again ends up being a fairly good size number. This incorporates all the civil site work that we called out for in the set of drawings. So there's obviously room to either phase possibly some of this or to reduce the scope somewhat. Based on what this set of numbers was, and the last conversation that we had in reviewing this with Joel and Mark and company was, was that we're feeling fairly confident between the kind of the upper set of numbers, these percentages, and then the fact that we could probably there is scope to pull out of this, that we could responsibly go out, with a number that is less than this. And I don't, maybe rather than kind of talk about what that could be, maybe I can answer questions about what these numbers represent, and then go into detail where you think it would be helpful.
We
Sure,
had
thanks,
oh,
Peter.
go
I
ahead,
just
Matt.
wanted to let Mark go at it because I know that you gentlemen have another meeting shortly. So if we could let the fire department maybe have the first crack at Peter, and then we'll go through the trustees.
So, yeah, when we had sat down and we talked, yeah, the addition, it is what it is. I mean, I really don't think there's much we can change on there. Yeah, we do have a lot of talented guys in this department that there was some thoughts where if we couldn't completely finish the second floor, maybe that's some stuff we could do in-house, and maybe do a partial. But we had, you know, in conversations with Joel, myself, a couple other guys, we said, well, you know, if we're gonna do it, let's do it. The existing firehouse, I know the bathroom renovations is basically the biggest thing. That's big dollars moving that stuff around. After we looked at this, we did see some other ideas on where we could incorporate showers and not really have to touch the bathrooms. You know, maybe add, you know, one more urinal or a toilet, but for the most part, we can add showers and right near there where there's plumbing that might take out a big chunk of renovating those bathrooms. So I know the bathrooms do get kind of expensive at times, you know, to do that. Otherwise, you know, we can tweak here and there. We were kind of shooting for that 2.5 number. I still think, you know, we should be able to get there. I'm hoping we can get there. But, you know, that's all in conversations that we've had. But really, you know, from where we look, you know, what you guys have done and helping us out is amazing. I'll say this publicly, Joel, you and the board have been more support to this fire company than we've ever had prior to this. Through the fire, which will hopefully be moved back in this weekend and Monday, back home. And then the progress we've done on this, just at the same time trying to rebuild, has been amazing. So again, from all of us, thank you, thank you, thank you. And
You're
hopefully
welcome.
we
It's
can
our
get
pleasure
this
and it's our duty, frankly.
so no, again, thank you. So otherwise, it looks great to us. Peter, you did a great job. It looks awesome. You know, we're excited to get this project going. So
Great. Well, it's been great. It's been great working with you guys.
So thank you, Chief Hildenbrand. Trustees, so we're in a mode now where I can't see everyone super at the same time anyway.
Do you want? I can stop sharing.
Yeah, if that's all right.
How's that?
Great. Nice. There's Emily's
Yep.
fingers. So trustees, we have Mr. Sweeney with us, and I know you've had this document for some time. Everyone's had a hard copy, you've had a digital copy, and now Peter just shared it on the screen a little bit. Please feel free to ask questions or anything. Susan.
I have two questions. I'm a little bit of a broken record on this, but what efforts were made to reduce the eco impact of this building to make it more energy efficient, to reduce the cost of maintenance?
I mean, you know, we're assuming, and the numbers sort of reflect a pretty rigorous building envelope design, and you know, an efficient, heating cooling system. We did talk at various points about the fact that it could be a project that would lend itself to photovoltaic, possibly. And I think the conversation, and I apologize because I don't remember where we ended up, but was that we would look at that as a kind of add-on, possibly looking for grant money for that, as opposed to sort of included in the base, you know, the base set of numbers. I mean, obviously, you know, there's a whole slew of potential, you know, green sustainable strategies that we can plug into this. I think that we'll, you know, the ones that come to mind beyond sort of, you know, super sort of as high efficiency as possible building envelope design. Might be alternative, energy use, but those again, they're going to add to this number, not subtract. And so I guess it would be a conversation with the board about sort of, how much they're interested in spending to address those issues. But as far as, I'm concerned, it has been sort of there as a conversation. We, just so you understand, are sort of through what I would call the schematic, design of this. And if we want to incorporate some of these other strategies, we would really try and plug those in once we have a number we're all agreed on and a scope of work we're agreed on during design development.
I wasn't thinking so much of alternative sources of energy as I was of insulation rates, things that would reduce the cost of heating, lighting, which can be fixture specific, those kinds of things.
Yeah, and that is all the building envelope. The insulation package has already been spec'd and as I said, is high performance. The presumption, because we obviously haven't specified actual lighting fixtures and things like this at this point, but would be that would be, at or in this particular case, probably substantially above, what energy code requires. And that makes perfectly good sense. I have to say, the one thing is that a firehouse is a difficult building envelope to make super efficient. We did, in going through the first phase of getting these fire doors spec'd, I mean, there's additional cost that was put in, that was, spent to make these, make them insulated as opposed to uninsulated. Obviously, we need to keep an ambient temperature inside the truck bays. They're hard to, that section of it is really hard to make really tight, but the rest of the building is, is going to be, top of the line building envelope.
And everything now is LED in here. So
Right.
when we rebuild, every single light is LED. All the bay lights are LED. They're amazing. They're all, and anything in the bays, they're small little lights, and the amount of light it produces is unbelievable. So we basically probably just copy that over into the other two bays. Everything in here and the drop ceiling lights everything is LED. So we made improvements when we redid this one as well.
We had an offer from one of the senior engineers at NYSERDA to review the project and make suggestions if that was a possibility. Would this project be at this date where we could say, would you take a look at these plans and see how we're doing?
I would say it's probably not at that state. I mean, what they're going to want to see are detailed wall sections and specifications that are, I mean, if my experience with NYSERDA is they're looking for a level of detail that we weren't retained, and we're not at the stage to show them. But I've known from the get-go that is a kind of a really important part of the project, and as it moves forward, I think all of that would sort of get folded in, and then certainly reviewed by whoever we feel like would be the appropriate person. But NYSERDA makes sense. So
the deal is we might get some grants from
Right.
that source also
yeah,
to defray costs. The second question is really for Mark. What's with the 5 beds?
5 beds.
Yeah, on the second floor.
So the second floor is designed as a bunk room. So when we stay here, when there's storms that come through, there's winter storms, we're here for multiple days. In the past, we've literally slept in fire trucks. We've housed people in our meeting room. We've slept on the concrete floors. We've slept on floors in here, slept in fire trucks. This way, and county's doing it more and more, if there's a major storm coming through, they want you to stage at the firehouse, not responding from home. So this will allow us to house guys here. And the way EMS is going as well, if you have to go to some sort of paid ambulance in the near future, or somewhere down the road, you'll be able to stage an ambulance in the village that would cover the village, Red Hook, wherever it may be, and they would have sleeping quarters. Right now, we should even have showers. We don't even have showers. We're required by law to wash our gear every single time there's a fire, as well as shower. They don't want it in our cars. They don't want us going home. So there's a lot of things in there that we should already have that we don't. But the bunks are mainly for when we're here for long durations. You know, sometimes we get back here at 2 a.m. Guys got to be to work at 6. This way they could, you know, keep some stuff here, shower, get some rest before they have to be to work. So that's really what that was incorporated for.
Good question. Trustee Schneider, did you have a hand up?
I did have a hand up. I wanted to just kind of put out there, I'm assuming that this project would have the benefit of our collaboration with the Town of Red Hook Community Solar Array as well. So all of the other efforts notwithstanding, we're still going to see some offset on the costs in terms of the energy consumption just through the solar array program.
Mhm.
Thank you, Trustee Schneider. So what I'm hearing, we have a lot of numbers, and we have what we think are good numbers, but we're also saying that we may want to sort of back down a little bit. And I know that part of the purpose of hiring Peter to do this work is so that we have a number that we can go to the wide world with, be that grants, other political entities, our representatives, and the public, and say Tivoli needs to raise X. And so it does sound like we still have a little more work to do just to use what Peter has provided. And I don't know that we have that number, do we? Without a little more discussion about, for example, Mark, you were talking about the bathrooms. You know, I know we're never going to know exactly what the number will be, but you know, we have a need here to have sort of a public number that is not going to be horrendously off or surprise anyone in a very dynamic world and market right now, and probably going to stay that way for the coming years. So it does sound like maybe we need to have another look at this, and because we don't want to stop here, right, Mark? I mean, it's about
No.
so to
yeah.
do the public campaign, we have to do a couple things, which is make sort of a package of the image of the concept, and also have a good number that we can go knock on, the governor's door and the county executive's door and everyone else's door and state representatives and say Tivoli needs this.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the number that has been put together here is good. I mean, I feel it good enough that there's a reasonable chance that for the same amount of scope, you could maybe do it for less. But in terms of being responsible and not wanting to get caught out down the road, for this scope of work, this seems like a responsible number to me professionally. And it was put together by a team and by Slocum, who this is what they do. So I would say if the board decides that they don't want to go out with this number, then you've got to reduce the scope. And I guess maybe that's what you're saying, Joel, is that you want to have that conversation. What could we take out or adjust? And yes, we can go through that and see what other number we might arrive at.
So
Right.
Peter, can you clarify sorry.
Go ahead,
No,
Jean.
please.
I just want to clarify. I think that I heard you mention that the numbers that you rolled out includes a 10% contingency.
It includes a design contingency, which is a little bit different than a contingency which the village should hold. In other words, the village should hold a contingency, but that would be something you'd add on after you should anticipate adding on for changes or for change orders. The design contingency just reflects that in generating the estimates that we've done here, because we don't have all the details, because we don't know all the specifics of, exactly what's going into the project.
Right, all the material specs and all, like, down to the small details. I got
Right.
it. Thank you
So-
for clarifying that.
Okay, yep.
So
Trustee Cole?
thank you. I guess that's my question. We're talking about ways to potentially get that number down. My bias is to make sure, and I think Joel was getting at this, that the number we go out with, if we come under, that's fantastic, right? That's great. That's great to the public, but it certainly becomes difficult if we go significantly or even a little bit over that number. So it sounds to me, Peter, that even with all of the unknowns of material cost and what's going to happen in terms of trade and getting materials in and the cost post-COVID and over the next couple of years, you seem to feel pretty comfortable that the 3.1 is something that we're not going to go over significantly. Am I hearing that correctly? Or you have, and I don't mean to put you on the spot. I know you can't say for certain, but with contingencies, you feel that would cover things?
Well, I've done this long enough to know that, it's very dangerous to say you feel comfortable, but based on similar projects, based on the sort of square footage numbers that I'm seeing, this seems like a reasonable number based on that. The other thing, which I think it invariably always happens that there's value engineering. You go out to bid and things very rarely end up coming in less than you expect. But what I'd say is that there's enough scope in this that we can peel back and still have the fundamental core of the project intact. That and we don't want to do that. And I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying that there's some room to peel some things out of this project if we had to. Let's just say, the board decides to go out with this number, and the numbers come in 10% higher. There is room in the project as it's designed to take that out without compromising the guts of the project. So that's
it sounds like we have.
Sorry, that's the safety factor that
Okay, all right. That's what I was asking. So
okay.
So it almost sounds as if we have the optimal plan, right? If everything goes smoothly and everything comes in line with our projected numbers, and then we have the backup plan or plan B, and we've prioritized those elements of the project that we can remove without actually compromising the integrity of the overall project.
Yes, I mean, we usually break these projects into, several adult, just break it into, smaller chunks of work that can be add alternates, just so you don't get stuck having to rebid the entire project. But
Got it.
So we talked about that, and obviously as you get further into the development of the project and into the design and the documents of it, it'll be more scientific. But I understand that when you go out, you raise money. The worst thing in the world is going to be to find out that the project is fundamentally over budget. So I think that there's ways to set up down the road the documents so that you may only get to do A and B and not do C, but as long as you and so I think that, correct me, Mark, if I'm wrong, but I think that this set of documents represents pretty much everything that you guys want.
Yeah, this will set us up very, very well for the future. So this does, and we know there's a possibility we're not going to raise it all. And like we said, if we can get A and B done and not do C, and then we can slowly work on that as as we get everything else. But we are out of room. We are out of room. Our department is growing like you wouldn't, I don't even have room to put people in fire trucks anymore. I am out of room. So the fact that, down the road, there might be other pieces of apparatus here just to transport people. We are one of the fastest growing departments in Northern Dutchess County, and it's amazing, but we need it. We need it bad. And as far as I'm concerned, let's go for it. Put that number out there. Let's build what we got to build and go for it. I mean, if we ask too little, we're going to get too little. I think we've got to, we know what we want. We've got it drawn. We know the numbers. Get what we can get. And when we say, okay, this is the kind of money we got, then we tweak it. But for right now, I think we run with it. Fire departments right now are critical, and nobody around here can afford to pay departments. So if we can get this going, it'd be great. So, and I see what we've done this past year, just with what we've done at the firehouse and growing. I wouldn't be surprised if we build this building, our department doubles. It's this kind of stuff is exciting. People love it, and they want to be part of it. So, but yeah, and I got to run. But in my opinion, I say, I'd rather go higher than lower, and I think we're all on the same board with that. So we've got a number. Peter's done a great job with that. There is stuff in there we can peel, if we need to. But I think we run with what we've got and go from there. So.
Thank you very much, Mark, Tom, Ralph. Glad you guys could join us. Have a good meeting.
No problem. Thank you. Stay
right.
safe, guys.
Thank you. You too.
So thank you, Peter. Trustees, while we have Peter, is there anything else right now? We certainly know where to find him. And now that we've had a nice walkthrough, as nice as we can do in this Zoom format, we all may have some more questions, but I'm sure Peter will be available for follow-up.
No, absolutely.
Anything else right now before we move on to some of our other topics to discuss in tonight's workshop?
I'm good.
Chris Shaw, do you have anything? All right. Well, Peter, I want to thank you for coming in tonight to our Zoom meeting. Great work. It has been a pleasure working with you as well. And I'm sure we will be speaking with you again very soon. But I think I've got the understanding of the strategy now. It's not so much that you peel back now to get the lower number. You get the number, and then if you fall short, you peel back later. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah. I think that sounds, it's like the strategy that makes sense here. So, and just as a final note, as I mentioned, like the initial kind of time that we spent, if you need help putting together promo material or whatever, please don't hesitate to let me know. And likewise, if you have more questions or you want to, go into more detail, please let me know.
Great, thank you. And I don't know if you heard, but we did pass the zoning change.
Oh, okay. I guess
So
I
that
did.
happened.
So, all right, good.
So one less impediment out of the way for
All
Tivoli's
right.
big dream.
Okay, great.
All right.
Good
Thanks
to
so
see
much,
everybody.
Peter.
Okay, take care.
Thank you, Peter.
Bye-bye.
Okay, thank you, trustees. The next thing I want to talk about is the Crosswalk Cdbg. This afternoon, I sent you a recommendation letter from Crawford and Associates. This was for a community development block grant that the village was fortunate enough to win through Dutchess County. We have had a great track record of winning and executing these. I believe that because we get them built and done and the public begins to enjoy them relatively quickly, we win others. I know that the funding agencies like to see the money awarded actually turn into the sidewalk, the bus stop, what have you. We have two others out right now. One is this crosswalk. The idea is to put two crosswalks in the village, one at Clay Hill Road across Broadway, and the second in front of the historic Watts de Peister Hall across Broadway to Pine Street, connecting Village Hall, the library, and Memorial Park. I know it came late in the day, so interestingly, while this was sent to over 43 contractors, it goes on a big county list, as well as Crawford sent it to several individual vendors that we've worked with. We received a single bid. And I don't know if Chris Shaw, you want to talk about how that sits against procurement?
Yes, your engineers expected to review that in making their recommendations and determine whether there was something special that would have made that happen. You know, presumably they structured the specs in such a way that it should have been attractive to more people, but for whatever reason, it's a very small project. You know, that would be a question for them as to why that happened.
Sure. My
No.
suspicion is, because I've done this a few times, that often the Tivoli projects tend to be a little small.
Yeah,
And this
it's very
grant
small.
amount was 40.
Mhm.
And by the time you mobilize, it's not an attractive project to a lot of contractors. So
Right,
that may well be the case. I'd certainly ask Crawford, be happy to do that.
right.
But going into the recommendation letter, we see that Frank Vosberg came back with, let's see, $30,700 to do both locations. And you'll see there's an alternate. This is all based on what kind of paint you use. The alternate is for wear-resistant paint, and we had that broken out, different price for each location. And the paint jobs in both location with the sturdier paint is actually more than the crosswalk itself, which is pretty amazing. 17,000 and 15,000. So I don't think that we're going to get the super high grade paint. I don't see that in the cards. I do know that both of these would be going across County Route 78 Broadway, County Road, and we had to do an awful lot of interactions with Dutchess County particularly on the design of these crosswalks and what is appropriate in our historic village in terms of signage, et cetera. But it did come up in all those conversations that, about every 2 years or every year, I can't remember which, the county contracts with crosswalk painters, and they have a cycle where, every year they do these crosswalks, and then the next year they do those crosswalks. And I could be off about my cycle if it's 1 year or 2 year, but we can get on that cycle. So the repainting of these over the years, we could, piggyback on the county's procurement and contracting so that our 2 little crosswalks can be included in a large crosswalk painting project for a countywide vendor. And so that's a great opportunity for us to both keep them well painted and looking beautiful and doing their safety function at the most cost-effective manner. So do you have any questions on this? And Chris, I don't know, trustees, I think it's fine if we didn't approve this award till next week at our regular meeting. I don't know that a week right now is going to matter. But Chris, if we were to approve it, can we do it by motion or do we need a resolution?
I can read you a resolution.
Well, why don't we
It would
open it up
not be
to conversation?
would not be hard if that's what you want to do. We can do that.
Right. Well, I don't know any reason not to do it next week, and I sort of don't know any reason not to do it tonight. So I would like to listen to our board.
Well, it sounds to me as though if it went out to 45 different companies and only one place to bid on it, we've done our due diligence, right, as a board and as a village. So, I mean, we could go ahead and approve it tonight.
Right. It's not as if waiting is going to change any of those,
Yeah,
circumstances there. So it's.
Yeah.
I agree.
It's just,
Just to
good.
confirm, sorry,
Go ahead, Chris.
do you have authorization from the county office to award? Would be my only question, because it's a CDBG project.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Do you have authorization from the county to award because it's a CDBG project? Do we have that authorization?
I believe we do.
Okay.
What would be holding us
That's-
back on the authorization? I mean, they approved the final design and told
Well-
us to go to bid.
Right, but they have to actually approve the award. So we could make the resolution contingent on that if need be.
Why don't we do that, do it that way? So I'm going to keep some minutes here since it looks like we're going to take an action. So
Are
when
you writing the resolution, Chris?
I have a draft, but obviously I wasn't sure what your alternates were going to be and so forth. So if I could just read it quickly, then I'll send a copy to Joel.
please, and I can insert that in the
That would be
minutes.
okay, right. So would you like me to read the resolution?
Please.
Authorizing, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Authorizing the acceptance of proposal for the Village of Tivoli Broadway Crosswalk CDBG project, whereas the Village of Tivoli, Dutchess County, New York, solicited sealed bids for the Village of Tivoli Broadway Crosswalk CDBG CNA number 4589.47, based on plans and specifications prepared by Crawford and Associates Engineering in the Village of Tivoli. Whereas after review of one proposal received, Crawford and Associates Engineering has recommended approval of the proposal of Frank Fosberg and Sons, Inc. and the lump sum fee in the amount of $30,700 for locations 1 and 2, with alternate 1 in the amount of $17,100 and alternate 2 in the amount of $15,000. Excuse me. Now therefore be it resolved by the Board of Trustees of the Village of Tivoli by the favorable vote of not less than majority as follows. Number 1, subject to approval by the Dutchess County Planning Office. The Board of Trustees awards the project to Frank Fosberg and Sons, Inc. for the lump sum price of $30,700 for the base contract only, no alternates, as set forth in the proposal on file with the village clerk. Mayor Griffith or is in his absence, and number 2, Mayor Griffith or in his absence, Deputy Mayor Major is hereby authorized and directed to execute the contract on the terms and conditions set forth therein. Such contract shall be approved by the officer executing such contract consistent with the terms of this resolution, and this resolution shall take effect immediately.
Thank you, Chris. So that's our resolution, folks. I'd ask for a motion,
so moved.
and I have a motion by Trustee Cole and a second by the Deputy Mayor. We will do a roll call vote, please. Trustee Ezrati,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Major,
Aye.
Trustee Schneider,
Aye.
Trustee Cole,
Aye.
and I also vote in support of the resolution. That's unanimous, all in favor. And congratulations to Vosberg and Sons. I will get that off to the county and test our contingency on county approval there. And the resolution will be filed with the clerk tomorrow. So thank you, that's it. I'll just thank Dutchess County Planning and DPW. The Village of Tivoli is amazingly particular about our historic requirements for the aesthetics of things, certainly in front of the Watts de Peyster Hall and throughout the village as a whole. I know that the county gave the Village of Tivoli an awful lot of time so that we could arrive at a safe and appropriate design for these crosswalks. And I also am very excited for the residents who will benefit from them, you know, particularly up at Clay Hill, where we have, lots of younger younger Tivolians who may just be ready to get out of their strollers. We've been working for 5 years and we have succeeded in extending sidewalk replacement all the way out to this location. So this continues our ongoing effort for connected walkability throughout the village, and having it safe and nice from one end of the village to the other. So these will be two nice additions to that infrastructure. The next thing, also trustees, sorry, Deputy Mayor.
Joel, I just wanted to say thank you for sticking to your guns with the county and making sure that it got done in a way that, was sensitive, because you had to do a lot of, negotiating and, calling in some extra firepower and thank you.
You are welcome. Thank you very much, Emily. We did a lot of work, the county and myself. So the next thing will be, it's been brought to our attention that the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority needs to get some internet to the sewer treatment plant and the building down there. It looks like Trustee Cole has the drawing on your screen.
I do.
So let's spend a little time with that. I know we haven't had a ton of time to review since I sent it to you this afternoon. So this is a workshop. This is the behind the scenes, roll up the shirt sleeves and get to work. So the public can watch us discuss this. The drawing is that they need to run something across, is it 2 village parcels? I don't
Yeah.
have my drawing up in front of me, but I will try.
Yeah, it looks like 2. Yeah.
Yeah. And is there any consideration here, Chris? I mean, I think we want to enable the water authority to do what it needs to do. And we own both of these parcels. And it just seems that perhaps we need like a permitting process to document the act.
Right, I think that's right, because just like any situation, we just want to have something in writing in terms of certainly they're going to have to dig safely, and we need to make sure that they're not running into anything, with the line. But I mean, it's sort of an interim situation because ultimately they're going to be controlling this, 100%. So.
Right, and I'll just read their communication to us for the folks out there watching. The Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority desires to install high-speed internet service to the Tivoli sewer plant located at 26 Public Works Drive to support staff working in this area. We request your permission to complete this activity as the proposed installation will cross 4, village properties. The internet service would extend from Montgomery Street across the village property to the Tivoli sewer building. Following utility location, the conduit will be installed using a narrow trenching device with the surface restored in kind following the activity. This work is anticipated to incur over 2 days, utilizing the DCWWA staff operators. Timing-wise, we would like to complete the work during the current month. At your convenience, I would like to speak with you regarding this request. So that's what we're reviewing. Trustees, do you have any questions or any objections to this request? These properties where I believe they're referred to as a ditch witch. It's a little machine that digs a trench. I know some of us are familiar with them because we've been using them to do our daffodil planting. It's the same, you end up with the same trench. Both of those properties are at the far end of Montgomery Street to the south, and they are currently essentially grassy meadows that we mow, once a year in the fall. There's no structures, it's just sod.
Are they in the direction of Kid Lane from the sewer plant?
They are between the sewer plant and Montgomery Street.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. So Chris, is there an action we need to take associated with this, or do we have a standard permit, or is this going to get a special permit that's going to be designed for this project?
You know, we have a version of a permit, but I think because this is crossing not our public right of way, but rather the village's property at the moment, I think if, you know, given the existing agreements that we have with the DCWWA for operation, I think we could authorize a permit, if you want to do that by motion, authorize the, you know, issuance of a permit by the mayor. Because I think this is beyond the typical sort of road crossing permit that we would normally do.
Okay.
So I think we want a specific written permit.
And so can we do a motion?
We have a drawing, so I think on the basis of the drawing and the purpose, I think that's enough information.
So we don't need the permit drafted and filled out?
No, I mean, the permit is right. There's not much to it. It's going to identify the you know, who's the holder of the permit and a couple of conditions about, you know, making sure that they follow certain requirements.
And
There's
is this permit something you can draft for us after we take the motion, or is this something that we're going to have?
No, I mean, I think because ordinarily the permit process is ministerial anyway. Because it involves going across your water and sewer property. But given that you're giving the permit to the operator of the property, essentially, that's really what you're doing. And I think we just want to clarify that this is going to be an operating cost that they would include in our water expenses, but I assume that would be the case. Because they're going to do it themselves, right? So this would be an operating cost.
One question I have is these parcels that are being crossed are not part of the parcels that are going to be ultimately given to the water authority, right? So the final sewer plant parcel is, but say that meadow parcel abutting Montgomery Street, am I incorrect about that? Because if the village maintains ownership of that, they will have perhaps long-term maintenance access desires.
Right.
And that would be, I'm assuming, in the form of an easement or some other
Right, so does
sort
that have
of.
to become a formal easement or?
Well, it may ultimately, I don't know that, I mean, it's an interlet line. I don't know how I guess the question would be how expensive is it for them to do that? And is it fine to have a temporary permit for the time being? And they can, once they do surveys and, you know, because they haven't done any of that yet, right?
Right.
Once they do all of that, they can work out a permanent easement if that's what's necessary, subject to, I mean, that would be a further approval.
Right, right. So I think we should earmark that as something that may be in the cards in the future, but sounds like tonight we could do a motion to approve this proposal from the Dutchess County Water and Wastewater Authority to trench across those 4 properties and to install with their own staff the internet line. Is there a motion to that effect?
So move.
That was moved by Trustee Ezrati and seconded by the Deputy Mayor. Do a roll call. Trustee Cole,
Aye.
Trustee Schneider,
Aye.
Trustee Ezrati,
Aye.
Deputy Mayor Major,
Aye.
and I also support the motion. Aye. So I will inform the Water Authority that their permit will be coming shortly and that they can probably get this done within the month as they had hoped. So thank you all for that. So now we're moving into just some general discussion of a number of things. The Village Yard Sale Day would normally be coming up at the end of July. And I would like to discuss if that event is still possible under the COVID situation. I'm all ears, folks. What do we think?
I think that since the governor is limiting graduations to 150 people, like the idea of having how many 100 people milling around and touching stuff is a horrible idea.
I'm also gonna,
Yeah, I agree. I've actually had 2 people already, older people, come up and express concern and asking if we could please delay, because they're reluctant to have people do exactly what Emily was saying, to touch things. And I certainly would be in favor of waiting. I think it's too soon.
I'm going to say that I concur completely. I think the fact that we've seen a lot of other local events, including the fair, right, canceled for this year, warrants a little caution. We also don't have a really clear indicator of how the various phases of reopening are going to impact COVID cases, just long term. We've only just begun that process. So I would say that, a delay with a, latest that it would occur this year sort of date would be reasonable, as opposed to just a straight out cancellation.
Yeah, maybe
Right.
put that out as a projected date, depending on
Contingent on, right.
public health and what's happening.
So are you saying a projected date for its normal final Saturday in July, or
No.
a later date?
A later date, a later projected date, but also, communicate that will be contingent on circumstances, whether we make that 2 weeks in advance, 2 weeks prior, so people have time to prepare if we're going to just cancel the whole thing for this season.
Mm-hmm.
Now, here's a question. Can we stop someone from having a yard sale? I know that it's quite clear that we are not going to be doing the general village promotion, and the mayor's not going to stand out there in the sun for 4 hours handing out maps, talk about contact with people.
I've already seen some yard sales just on the weekends as I'm out driving around, the county. So people are holding yard sales. I haven't seen anything in the guidance that forbids it. But I think that's a big difference if an individual household wants to hold a yard sale and is okay with strangers coming and touching their stuff versus having the village sponsor something.
That said, I think we may anticipate some issues if we have a large number of residents who want to proceed. And if it's not a village sponsored event, they're going to continue to do it anyway. At which point, I think that honestly, our response is we can't necessarily tell them no, but we can let them know that they need to enforce the required guidelines that are in place at any given time, right?
Yeah, and I think we can certainly communicate to the public, the Village of Tivoli is not doing
endorsing, recommending,
yard sale day,
none of that, right?
and we
I
can
sort of like
encourage and recommend that everyone else hold off as well.
Yeah, and I wouldn't even get into, I would take that stance that we really don't encourage it, what you just said, and don't even get into, but if you
No.
just
No.
leave it. Just, we don't encourage it. We're asking the public to, respect that and be safe and all that stuff.
Great. All right. Well, I think
I
we
would
know.
even be in
Susan?
favor of just canceling it for this year. Just let's not string people along in the same way that, students are being strung along about graduation. Like, chances are having a, giant human scrum like the yard sale is, I don't see it being okay this summer. So I think if we cancel it, it makes us sound more serious about that, about like the risks of it. And so people would be more likely to proceed with caution if they're doing an individual sale, right? Like if we hit it hard and just say, look, given the recommendations from the state about social distancing and the fact that like it's a big touchy event, like we're not,
I would certainly support just canceling. I mean, that makes sense to me.
I would agree with both of you, because if you're not doing it at the end of July, you're going to do it at the end of August. You're certainly not going to do it in September. You haven't given yourself enough time to plan for it, even if it was okay. And
Mhm.
Well,
I
thank
suppose the
you.
reality is if we cancel it and then circumstances change and we decide that it is a feasible thing, you can always, hey, things have changed, we're going to reschedule if there's enough time to plan. But if not, absolutely.
I think the formal messaging should be Tivoli Yard Sale Day is canceled this year, and we encourage everyone to save up your merch for later. Skip a year, there'll be more stuff.
I think too, the benefit would be added revenue for a cleanup day. Right? Like the stuff that's marginal, do I sell it? Do I junk it?
Well,
You know.
I'm going to skip the topic I had and take advantage of that segue you just underhanded to me.
Ta-da.
Village Cleanup Day. This, I think we could probably still do. This would be, I believe, the third year. It's been a tremendously popular event. It's mid-August. And I don't think that there's any exposure danger similar to a yard sale. And this is where people pay a fee to put a bunch of stuff they don't want anymore out on the curb. And the village hires a company to come along with a dump truck and pick it all up and take it away. And it's been a hugely popular and successful event we've offered the last few years. So personally, I'm interested in doing it again this August. And tell me what you think, folks.
I think with everybody in quarantine at home, I can't speak for everybody else, but I know that there was a fair amount of things that have been earmarked for it, get it out of my house, just in my own household. So you might have even more participation this year than you ever have. I would say that we can safely, move ahead with that.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, I think this will be the year that we see more stuff picked up than we've seen in the past. We've all had way too much time on our hands.
I concur.
You know, we don't do the inches of rain game anymore with the water report, but we can always do once a year. We can do the guess the
Tons of
tonnage,
junk.
up or down on the tonnage, Tivoli, because we've been in around 11 or 12 tons each year. So, flipping back now to something that after the yard sale conversation, I think won't take very long. This one is sadder for me, I think, but Tivoli Recreation Program, summer camp. A lot of towns and communities around us, our peers, Hyde Park, Ulster, Kingston, they're not intending to do their summer camps. So it's been wonderful. We brought that back from nothing a few years ago, and it's been really wonderful. But I do think the responsible thing and the loving thing to do is to take a pass this year. Is there anyone who disagrees?
I don't necessarily disagree. I just want to say that I've, just as a parent, heard a lot of conversation about, hey, we don't have summer school, but summer camps are open. So some private camps are able to open and operate. And I know that it's been a particularly difficult year for those parents who are working to have to find alternate daycare arrangements to, so I just kind of go, oof, sometimes you have some people really counting on that, and you might have that more than ever this year. Joel, I know that you just mentioned that there are a lot of neighboring communities who've already decided to cancel their programs. I can't really, especially after the yard sale conversation, you can't really argue that as, oh, hey, we should definitely do this. But I guess I just want to give a nod to the fact that, we may bump into some opposing arguments just because of the fact that some other summer camps will be operating, and the particular challenges it offers to residents to not have it.
So Ramapo down in Rhinebeck is actually doing their program this summer, and they have put together, like, they sent out to all the parents, like, this is how we're going to do it. And basically what they're doing is taking everybody's temperatures every day when they come, and like breaking the kids up into pods of 10 with no interaction between those within the pods of children, right? And just for tracking purposes, like if somebody does get sick, like if somebody does like start exhibiting symptoms, they have like a quarantine area outdoors. I think if we wanted to do it, because it is such an outdoor thing, and if we were to limit it to Tivoli kids, like there might be a way, playing off what Jean Ann is saying in terms of like parents maybe wanting a break, needing a break. And, I could argue the other side as well. Like for us to throw together a rec program right now seems, with everything else that's going on, like it might be a nightmare. But I think, we have like the Ramapo guidelines as a model for how we could think about doing it.
I also wonder if there's perhaps opportunity with the, I don't know, Child Care Council, with this local school district to, I'm not even sure where I want to go with that, but I feel almost like with the limited resources or the limited camps that will be open, we might be able to identify some partnerships with, like I said, the local school district maybe, to support whatever new measures, safety precautions we would have to put in place. I don't know.
I'm certainly, and I mean this sincerely, I'm certainly sympathetic to what parents have gone through and to what kids have gone through. The kids have, lost their social networks and structure of school, and it's been pretty much a nightmare for everyone. I guess where I come down is from my concern is the public health side of this and the hyperinflammatory syndrome that we've seen in kids, particularly in New York. And if we're talking about, we're just now beginning to really easily phase into reopening, right? And we don't know what that's going to look like. We were just talking about in terms of yard sale day. We're very careful. Joel and I have met with our business owners. We can't give dates for how long we'll be in phase 2. If we go to phase 3, it's all contingent on the number of cases. And I really feel with so many activities, and yes, there are some camps that are opening that are private and have adequate staff. My concern is we are tiny. And with a public health crisis and with a virus this potent, this is not something you can just have untrained volunteers watching the kids. And that's what concerns me. I think I'm concerned for the children that we might inadvertently put them at risk. And it takes a different level of staffing and vigilance than doing our usual camp. And I think, we've had wonderful, absolutely phenomenal camp counselors in the past, but this is different. You have to approach it with a vigilance around social distancing, touching, even though they're pods. I just feel like the risk may outweigh the benefits. That's just my opinion, because we're tiny. And I think it takes a level of staffing to pull this off.
No, I think you're right. And also the amount of liability to the village is untenable.
It's really quite huge. And I would vote no.
And, it's been challenging even in normal circumstances to actually fill out the staff, find the counselors. And we have no idea if counselors are going to feel comfortable with this job. Yeah. So, we haven't put that question out there yet, but that's obviously something that, it may be even harder if we were to do it, to find the staff that we usually have. And I certainly agree with you, Trustee Cole, that it's a whole nother level of staff responsibility, training, et cetera.
Yeah,
So,
and we're into mid-June, and I just
yeah,
don't think we have time to put together a safe, reliable training program, let alone the actual program with the kids. I just think it's too risky right now.
Well said.
all right. An update on the water tank project. I hoped several months ago, the Tivoli Village Board requested from the Water Authority and Ty and Bond, who are doing our project, excellent and frequent communication on the status of the project. And I think that that request was heard and answered quickly and quite well. I hope that you agree with me. I first want to make sure that I'm forwarding you these emails where they give pretty detailed reports of what happened in the project this week, whether it was doing inspections of adjacent properties before the pile tamping, or the utility pole to the McKnight well house was installed today. So first of all, I think I feel good about that level of response to our communication request. Are we agreed about that? Any? So last week, over a 5-day period, they drove 22 80-foot steel pipes through 70 feet of Tivoli clay to bedrock to create the piles, the foundation piles for the new water tower. I heard from residents up there that it wasn't as obnoxious as they thought it might be. I know you could hear it throughout the village. But I went up and watched. It was pretty amazing how few tamps it took to push these things down. But anyway, it went on over 4 days. They all went in fine. And the next step, as you read in today's report, will be to pour concrete into each of those pipes. And the water tower project is moving forward. And do I have that here? Yes. One of the great powers of mayor is to get to take the paint chips and pick the blue. As you know,
Do
in
they
my other
have an
life,
official Tivoli blue? Because I'm thinking, we ought to maybe, I was going to say, is it named Tivoli blue? I think we can market that to some paint companies.
yes. Well, we're going to tell this paint company that the color I selected for the blue was called Splash, which has a hydraulic ring to it. But maybe it should be called Tivoli blue. What was very
From this
interesting
point
is,
forward.
and this is no joke, the white color, which the camera color is distorting this, it's called tank white. So, I do in my other life have a master's degree in painting, so I was eager to take this on, and went over to the old tower. And interestingly, the blue has certainly faded a lot since, I don't know when that tower was painted last, 25 years ago, maybe. But if you get under there and you find a part that was not exposed to a lot of sunlight, it was a much deeper blue than I had expected. Of course, this fading happened over years. But the original blue of that tower was a pretty nice, strong blue. So I tried to pick one that will be able to start there and perhaps fade into a nice sky blue over the 20 years before the Water Authority will see that it's painted again. So I told them the paint color, so they'll be getting ready for that. Susan, in response to your question earlier today, right now the whole project is on schedule. We're anxious that the steel comes and is all erected, and then that it gets painted before the weather's too cold for that. But so far so good. So that's the water tank project. Something I need to fill the trustees on, and this is a very, very difficult conversation. Everyone on the village email list got an email from myself on June 4th. The subject was Our Village, Our Country. And it was something I was moved to write based on the murder of George Floyd and the national experience that we're living in right now. And of course, I know as well as every American that is something that's been going on for all of American history, essentially. I don't mean to sound like this just happened. I certainly understand that. So I wrote that email, and I'm elected to speak for Tivoli, and I feel in my heart that I'm able to do it. And I never say more than I believe in my heart or that I think my constituents would support. If I think there's something that I really can't say on behalf of the 1,118 people that I represent, I stop short of that. So I wrote this email. I think you all saw it. I know a lot of people out there saw it. 300 something people on the village email list saw it. And essentially it was a statement of this village does not condone, support. We are disgusted, frankly, by the police brutality that we witnessed in an event such as the murder of George Floyd. That we are a community who stands for justice for all, that we welcome all, that we are a community that believes in and works for welcome, tolerance, inclusion for all people. So I sent that email out. I got over the next 2 days about 50 emailed responses, and they fell very strongly into two categories. The first was any version of, thank you, Mayor, for what you said. Some of them were very touching for me personally, you know, glad you're our mayor. I got to wish you were our president. I got, you know, we're proud to be Tivolians at this moment because of what you said. And those 25 emails certainly make me feel like I'm doing a good job representing this community, because sometimes it's hard to speak for the 1,118 Tivolians because we're different people. The other category of emails I received were either mixed or outrightly critical of the words of my statement. And they were either, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for what you said. I'm sure you think you needed to say something, or what you said was good, but it didn't go far enough. And they told me how much further they would have preferred I went. And then also in that same 25 email category were some that were, there's no way to describe them other than unabashedly critical. Most of them touched on the village. Well, it was about the police policies in the village of Tivoli, which I certainly confer with all the residents and this board, but it is one of the singular responsibilities of the mayor to direct law enforcement. So these emails, and what I need to do is get these all gathered up. I've had a very busy week, haven't been able to achieve this by tonight, which I had hoped. Gather these all up and send them to the board so that you can see all 50 of them. Because you share the responsibility of representing this community with me, and we are one board. I believe that very strongly. So I need to get you up to speed on what this public discourse has been, share that correspondence with you. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to do it tonight, but I'll do it as very soon as I can. And you'll get to see them each individually, but in a nutshell, what the critical ones, whether it was mixed and nuanced or just outright, they said, Mr. Mayor, your use of the police in the village to enforce your law, the noise ordinance, is threatening the lives, was one email of residents of color. I was called a hypocrite for saying this was a community of toleration, and yet for these critics. They said, you're a hypocrite because you said that, but then what you do is send cops to come to us. So it's clear to me that there needs to be a conversation. And I hope that in the next few minutes, we can talk a little bit about the format for that conversation. These folks who were critical were generally, although not to a person, Bard students. They were not all Bard students, but I would say most of them. They were of various races and ethnicities. I believe many of them were residents and therefore constituents of this board. I couldn't say for sure if every single one of them was, but it doesn't matter so much. The point is there is a constituency who is deeply concerned and critical of the way the police policies have been in this village. A number of these emails said things which I know for a fact the author doesn't have all the information that they need to actually say what they said, but I hope that we will give it to them. For example, defund the police. As you know, Tivoli has no police department. We rent, sorry for that word, deputies, but we contract with the Dutchess County Sheriff's Office deputies. Those patrols, depending on the officer, their time of service, generally it's about $400 for 4 hours to the Tivoli taxpayer. And the facts are that 6-7 years ago, this village was spending $45,000 a year on police, $47,000 a year on police, $40,000 on police. And then over the last 5 years, our budget allocation and the actual spending has gone down each year. And in the fiscal year that just ended, in the last fiscal year, we are in the $14,000, $16,000 range. And so that's about a third of what we were spending even 5 years ago. So I look forward to sharing that information with the whole community so that this conversation about police policies can start to be rooted in fact. I completely understand and agree with a lot of the outrage. I'm an American and I feel that in my heart as well about what we're seeing in our country. This is me speaking, Joel, not the mayor of Tivoli. I think the militarization of police across our republic is a problem. And it's one that all Americans should, and I believe they are, and I really hope that we do get together and address. But there are nuances to importing the national situation onto this village. The important question that I hope we can get together on is, why are there police in Tivoli? If someone can answer that question truthfully with an open mind, I think we will all quickly get to, could we have less police? Because no one has police to have police. They have police to enforce laws, laws like our own, which are arrived at through a democratic process in broad daylight by a vote of the elected representatives of the entire community, of every citizen. All the laws on the Tivoli books were arrived at and enshrined through that process. And we should feel good about that. And whether the people critical of the laws were present for that process. In some cases, the village noise law went on the books in 1997. And the nuisance gathering law went on the books in 2015. So there is really a lot to talk about. But I think the anger and outrage from some of our constituents is very real. We need to get a discussion. And so that moves me to, how do we do this? It's COVID time. If it weren't, I would say, you know, this village, certainly in the last 5 years, has a great tradition of saying, okay, there's something real to talk about, whether it's backyard chickens or where to put a water tower or whether to transfer our systems. We have had a number of really wonderful, challenging, lengthy community conversations. And if it weren't COVID, I'd say let's get that on in the Shornborn meeting room on the 3rd floor of the historic Watts de Peister. We can't do that right now. I don't know that this is a conversation that I want to do in Zoom. It's too important. There's too much emotion. There are too many people who should get a say and get a hearing. How do you do that with 1,118 people? So I don't know that we're going to figure this out tonight, but this is something that has come to village government this week. Also, some more thoughts. You know, this is about a government in the village of Tivoli that represents people, that gets to set policy. But there are constituencies that are in this village, and they are also in the hamlet of Annandale and the township of Red Hook at the at Bard College. And how do we have this conversation with correct representation for all parties? Is it purely a Tivoli driven village board? This is about laws and it's Tivoli citizens who get to participate. We know that some of the people who are addressed by police because they've run afoul of our laws, whether they agree with them or not, are not Tivoli residents. And they are, for example, students who reside at the college, which is 3 miles from here. How do we do this? I mean, I think it can't happen quickly. It can't happen overnight. We have logistic challenges in congregating so we can have a conversation. And so I just want to paint that picture. Maybe we can talk for a bit, get some ideas. This needs to get figured out pretty soon. And just before I stop talking here, I'll say that I took a couple days. I had an awful lot of help from the deputy mayor, who fortunately for me is also holds a degree in English from Bard College and is a great writer, and helped me craft a response that I sent to the 25 correspondents who offered something that was in any way critical, anything that was not the great job, Mayor, thank you for saying what you said. I appreciate those, and I believe I did that, and those folks did not each get a personalized thank you or a group thank you, but they know me and they know. So we sent an email out 2 days ago to the 25 folks, and I will send that to you as well. So you'll have a packet. I hope I can get to this tomorrow. Every day it's been things. And it said essentially, I've listened. I hear you. The Village of Tivoli hears you. And there's a constituency that it has concerns and criticisms about police policies in the Village of Tivoli. And I said, I'm not exactly sure how this is going to work, but clearly we need to get talking with each other. And essentially, I will be back in touch with you as soon as I figure out how that can happen. I've received one response to that in 2 days since it was sent out. One of those people wrote me back and said, we look forward to the forum and we'll all be there. So that was interesting as well. So I'm sorry you haven't all heard this before. It's hard for us to meet as the board that we are. So I've told you now, and I'll get all that correspondence to you as soon as I can. But I'd like to hear from you for a few minutes on any thoughts you have, and in particular, how do we start figuring out how to have these conversations and who should be included, et cetera. And I thank you all very much.
Joel, through Rotary, I learned a lot about the group Red Hook Together, which includes, I believe, Erin Canan for the Center of Civic Engagement, and another Sarah DeVere, some other people. When you're talking, I hear a note of familiarity because that group has been dealing with issues of kind of overt racism in Red Hook. And they're equally surprised, astounded, flummoxed by those reports. It's not in their social set that they see this. So it may be well to sort of broaden the input that we're getting to see it as a more, I don't know whether it's college-centric or Red Hook, but just to find out some of the episodes, experiences that people have had, and to talk about it not just in a Tivoli context, but in a broader context.
I almost wonder if it is wise to start with our very small Tivoli contingent, Susan, and then expand it outward. So we can start at the source, right? We're responsible for Tivoli, but we also acknowledge that this is a much larger global conversation that needs to happen. But I am also interested in a conversation that it will allow us to be accountable at that hyperlocal level, right? I'm limited in what I can do in terms of changing the environment, the outcome in Tivoli, purely because I'm not on, or excuse me, in Red Hook, because I'm not on the Red Hook board, right? I have a far greater opportunity and responsibility to ensure that those things are happening here at home first. I'm a Tivoli trustee. So while I think that it is absolutely imperative to get an idea of the wider scope of experiences that people are having across the board, I think that for us to effectively change things in Tivoli, we really need to be looking at Tivoli first. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just kind of feels like we should start there and then expand outward. I'm also going to suggest that we might want to consider maybe a mediator. And I don't like to think that our board, I think, is very responsive. We work really diligently to make sure that we are actively listening. But I also think that there are so many impacts, so many contributing factors that play into the current world situation that we need to acknowledge that there's just components of this that are bigger than we are, right? Learned behaviors, or I'm not even going to get into all of those, but my point is that I think that with this super sensitive topic, this super sensitive conversation, it might be wise to have a mediator there on behalf to help our citizens, our constituents, actually engage in a productive conversation. Not just them, us too, right? We want to be able to make sure that we are creating the best opportunity for clear, concise communication around an issue that is so emotional. People have, I mean, obviously the email communications that you received after your statement are only a small indicator of the varying degrees of viewpoints and or levels of emotion that people have around this. So I would just want to be sensitive to that. In terms of forum and how we actually accomplish that, given all of the restrictions right now, I'm not really sure what that looks like. I don't know if we have the ability or if that's something we're really going to need to work out in terms of either hosting a web forum or, in my head, it would be a lot of moving parts there to make sure that it's done and giving everybody equal opportunity to express themselves and, have their turn.
So from my perspective, I certainly don't disagree with anything that's been said. I think we need to engage with all of those who either live in the village of Tivoli or interact with the village of Tivoli on a regular basis. So our Bard College students, our full-time residents who, as we have all said, we are elected to represent for this community. I like the idea of a moderator. I like the idea of a person of color moderating this panel for us. I think that would be very beneficial because we certainly come from every human on the planet comes from their own perspective and their own way of looking at the world. And I think it would be helpful to have someone that could help us frame the discussion and make sure that everyone has a chance to fully be heard. Because if there's one thing that for me personally, I'm getting from this moment in time, people are tired of not being seen and heard. And they're crying out to be heard. And that's valid. That is valid. And I am hopeful this is truly the point of revolution and change, real change. So I think that's an idea we may want to explore. I agree, Joel, we're not going to solve it tonight. I think we can all start to really think about this. As much as I have facilitated and participated in many difficult workshops and forums over the course of my life, I agree, ideally, we get in a room and we're able to look at each other and talk with each other. Unfortunately, that, as we've all said, is just not possible right now. That said, I have participated in some incredibly powerful, impactful Zoom forums about this very issue. One in my industry that was led by senior leaders of color. There was one from a medical center that was led by physicians and healthcare providers of color. And these were extremely well done, well moderated. People had a chance to speak, be seen, be heard. And they both, I think, had tremendous impact and outcomes. So I would not rule that out, that we could do something as we are doing right now, having meaningful conversation, it's a hard conversation, but it's one we need to have. We have to have. And so I would not rule that out. What I would like to see, I think, Joel, is let's, take it one step at a time, as you said. You will send us the emails and your response. I think it's important for the board, for each of us to read those emails, because it may spark something or an idea in us. And I really want to read and get a sense of what is being said. And then perhaps it is that the five of us need to have a special meeting just to talk about this, because it's critically important. And it's a conversation we do need to have. And that would be my recommendation, that tonight is a great starting point. And then maybe next week, or, whenever calendars can align, we can make that happen. And then begin to talk about, here's some examples, concrete examples, or people that might help us with this conversation, and start talking about the form that it will take then.
I love my board. I really do. Emily, anything you want to? I will yield the computer and give you some space.
Hi. We have been talking to Bard College as well about, the situation. And I think that taking advantage of our connections at the Dutchess County Human Rights Council, who helped us out with the Elro event. I think if we're going to have a facilitated conversation, that would be some good firepower to bring in, right? Like, just to help us with this, and to also help expand the context, right? Because we can talk about what's happening here, but, bluntly, most, if not all, of the letters from students mentioned the noise ordinance. So, in conflating, that and the murder of George Floyd, as Joel's brother, really succinctly pointed out, is, so wrong, right? So I'm in favor of putting together a packet of information on our policing strategies, our policing policies, like our policing intentions, right? Like why we do what we do, in contracting with Dutchess County Sheriffs rather than the Red Hook Police. Why we do, just to get the facts out there, because, the way the college student network seems to work in terms of information spreading is worse than a game of telephone. It's like my sister's brother's boyfriend got a ticket and, got punched in the head or whatever. And like, you scratch it a little deeper and it's just not there, right? So I think we have to really ground the conversation, separate out what's actually going on here, and then channel that energy where it belongs, right? Because there's a ton of energy and it does need to go somewhere constructive, somewhere that we can all agree on, right? So to sort of remove the adversarial, like I don't want us to go back to this being a town versus gown situation, because we've really gotten so far away from that paradigm in the past 5 years, largely because of the nuisance law, ironically. So that's what I got.
And well, I think, it's really about figuring out how to start the conversation, and I'll just, something I didn't mention earlier, but there are, as you all know, we have constituents come to board meetings asking for more police. Mm-hmm. And to my question of why do the police, why do they come to Tivoli, or why does the village of Tivoli contract with the deputies, and why does the mayor ask them to come patrol from time to time? And the ones that we hear repeatedly are speeding, blowing through the stop signs,
Mhm.
noise, open container, public urination, that stuff. Some of those I think are not controversial. I would offer that speeding is one that maybe everyone can say, you know, speed limit on Montgomery's 30 and you should be doing it. And we've got children in this village. Some are completely controversial and people want to criticize how it's enforced and even what we're trying to enforce itself. I mean, this is all stuff that we'll have to get to considerably into the conversation once it gets started. So I think, I don't know, I appreciate what you said, Trustee Cole, about, you know, maybe, I don't know what we can do but virtual meetings right now, frankly, and I'm glad to hear that, you know, a real conversation, you know, it's maybe not easiest in this forum, but I think it's all we have. So that might be where to go. And I am interested in some sort of moderator, perhaps, because, you know, whether I like it or not, I've got the face I've got. I'm sitting in the mayor's chair, and I'm the age I am, and there are some of the criticisms are coming from folks who I'm convinced already there's not much that's going to come out of my mouth, no matter how intended, that it's going to get across. And I think I need help getting information out through some other folks, right? I mean, I think that would be very valuable, because what I do believe in the information I have, it's vital to the conversation, however you feel about the decision at the end of it. It's got to get out there. So.
I feel compelled to say that I really do appreciate the idea of a moderator for all of the reasons you said, but also because we need to be really careful that we are not assuming that stories or experiences that people have had are going to, you know, we're going to scratch the surface and find they don't exist. I think that we have to be mindful that this larger conversation is about exactly that, people not feeling heard or their experiences not being validated, and the assumption that that doesn't happen here, because that's wrong. It does happen here. And I think that I think back to our Elro event, and I think that it's our obligation to just remember that, right? Like that's our job here, is to remember that we have to work as hard as we can to uphold that here in Tivoli without maybe some of those assumptions or some of those perceptions. We need to be open to the idea that there could be a whole lot of things going on that we don't understand, that we don't see. And it is a really this is a huge opportunity for us to really address it at a root level. And I think you're right. Some of our laws, you know, that's going to come into the conversation later, because it shouldn't be about the validity of our law. And you know, I'll wait to read those emails as well. But it sounds as if, you know, some of the constituents are taking exception to maybe the laws and how they're enforced causing greater threat to community members of color, right? Or minorities there. So I think it's a very fine line. It's a very careful line, and it can be really intimidating to speak about it, especially knowing that really we're supposed to be representing everyone. And I think if we're truly going to strive for that, we need to make sure that we're hearing all parts of that conversation, even the ones that we're not comfortable with.
Right. I feel that nobody at this moment has the whole picture. I don't, because I haven't heard from every person what their experiences were. They don't, because I know I'm the only one in this village who knows exactly what was spent over 10 years on cops right now.
Well,
But
and
eventually, if we get together and we listen to each other, we can paint the whole picture as best we all can. And only then can we start talking about what is right to do from there. And so that has to happen first.
Great.
And then we go further. And, you know, my philosophy is, particularly when there's, you know, we are essentially the problem solvers, right? I mean, that's what government's supposed to be doing, ideally. I believe that is what we do in Tivoli. People don't know what are we doing about chickens. We get together, we have a process, and we solve the chicken problem by arriving at a conclusion through a process that maybe not everyone agrees with, but everyone can get behind the process. We've heard that over and over. And so
A lot heavier than chicken.
when I've got a problem that I don't have the answer to yet, my philosophy is, let me share the problem with you. Let's talk about it together so we can get somewhere.
And I also think something I want to add to what Jean Ann said. You know, we're talking about, when we talk about Bard College students, right? We're talking about young people coming into the area from all different places, some out of the country, from all over the United States. And I think what's really important, and I hear what we're saying about the genesis of our laws and how these things came into play over the years. And sure, there needs to be education about that. That's deeper into the conversation. I think what we don't want to miss is some of these young people, maybe a lot, I don't know, are coming here and they have had their own lived experiences of fear, perhaps, of negative interactions with the police, with authority figures, and where we are a very welcoming village and we want to treat I feel this board, I know each of you well, and we want to genuinely treat everyone with respect and with equity. But when you have people at this moment of time that are thrown together in an area and we're all bringing our own emotion, history, and lived experiences into the conversation. And I think that's where a moderator becomes critical, who can be somewhat removed from that and help all of us included, really be able to come up with decisions that are based on really hearing what is being said. And it may not, you know, we may learn a heck of a lot. And we may hear some stories that are painful to hear, and they may not have happened in Red Hook or Tivoli, but there may be that fear that they will happen, because let's be honest, as we all look into the camera, we are a white board, and our experiences are different. And I think this is a very, very serious issue, and it will definitely need a bit of compassion, empathy, and finesse than, you know, the chicken ordinance or the water tower. And I think that's why we just need to read the emails, take a breath, and then come back and talk about the way forward to have this conversation, because this is something different, and it is a critical moment in time.
Any thoughts yet? And I agree, one step, get these emails out to the rest of you. We probably need to talk about this again soon as a board. Maybe that's a special meeting so we can keep this moving forward.
Yep.
Any thoughts yet on, say there's a Zoom meeting to start the conversation? Who's invited? How's it advertised? You know, is it just say these 25 people? You know, is it village-wide? Is it town-wide? I mean, I have no idea how to get this going.
I mean, I have some thoughts, but honestly, I think that's the conversation that we can have in more detail at our special meeting.
I would also be interested to see what our neighboring communities, right, as the village of Red Hook or the town of Red Hook, taking initiatives or sponsoring community conversations, because I think that collaborative efforts, right, it might be logistically sort of, if you can, how do I want to say this? I'm really sorry. Usually I'm a little bit more articulate, but this one has got me a little tongue-tied. I think we'll have a better idea of what is possible, feasible, whatever, if we also have an idea of what else is going around in our immediate communities, right? Obviously, Tivoli and Red Hook are tied. Anything that's happening in our small community is reverberating out at least that far, if not farther. So I think it's only logical to look at this from a perspective of, eventually it's going to be an all-encompassing thing. If we really want to make some change, it's gonna ripple at least that far. But I agree, it may be some finessing to that. I would suggest that we reach out and see what other activities, what other community responses are going on, and how we might either get some ideas from them or, work on plans to collaborate so we are making this a really effective initiative.
This is just a totally spontaneous idea, but doesn't the priest at St. Paul's work with communities on social issues?
Yeah, Father Masood at St. Paul's here in Tivoli, who's his work is essentially conversations between groups who are having a really hard time talking to each other. He does a lot of work in South Africa. He has a project in France, and his work is, how do you have a conversation under the toughest circumstances when people are starting, at odds?
So perhaps that's a conversation the board has to have before we even progress to a community conversation.
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, and we need to talk more about that.
Yep.
I have some concerns about that.
So, well, I think we got a little bit of something. We definitely, there's a little bit of clarity about some steps. It's difficult that they, we can't see too far ahead on the road, but that's just what's happening. And we are going to walk that road one way or another. So
on the flip side of that, Joel, just acknowledging that there is that road and that we need to start down it, first step, pretty big step. I'm really thrilled to be able to even just start the conversation, acknowledge the issue, and maybe really affect some change. Not maybe, really affect some change. No, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't know how you segue out of that one, but I want to thank you for the conversation. And anything else on this village board workshop tonight? Oh, I know. I would like maybe Trustee Cole will help me. But another thing happened yesterday, which is the phase 2 in the village of Tivoli. Trustee Cole and I have, we started just last Tuesday. Boy, every day is like a month this summer. We knew that the phase reopening was coming. And so Trustee Cole and I started a Zoom group. The idea was to have a weekly meeting with business owners so that we could help them get ready and get through the reopening phases. And I think was the day after that phase 2 was announced.
Yep.
So, so it's been fast, but maybe I could throw it over to you, Angela, to talk a little bit about where we're at and what's happening with our businesses and the reopening.
Sure.
Joel, I'm sorry, excuse me. I really need to jump off. I have to go to a virtual graduation, which is really important.
Oh, absolutely.
The student involved. So if you could just excuse me, I'm sorry.
You are very excused, Chris.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
All right.
enjoy the commencement.
Bye-bye.
Angela?
Yeah, so I think the first thing I would say is the business owners that were on the call were extremely grateful that we're doing this. And I'll be brief because I know it's late. The majority of the questions this week on this week's call, gosh, that was just yesterday. The majority of the questions were related to a couple of things. One was as restaurants reopen, there are a lot of regulations, right? CDC standards. You sit outside, for instance. Joel and I graciously did a trial run for all of you last night under the tent at Santa Fe. We took one for the team and tried it on opening night. But there are a lot of regulations. If you get up and you have to have a mask on, the staff has to wear a mask. If you get up to walk to the bathroom, you have to follow the arrows, put your mask on. A lot of regulations, and these are mandated. They don't have an option, and so signage. Yes, we have a law that says you can't have sandwich board. They have asked if we could give businesses leeway because they can use those sandwich boards to write out the regulations and have them in front of their business. Other signage, for instance, Rojo. Marisi and Ricardo wanted to know if they could hang a sign on the side of their building that points to where their patio is because it's in the back. You can't see it from the street, and this will be a new place of seating for them. So I certainly assured them and spoke with Joel after that we will, we'll give whatever leeway we need to as a village, as a board, so that we can relax some of those signage laws. And then there were other good questions, mostly regarding, for instance, yes, people have to wear a mask. Are businesses required to have hand sanitizer available? My guidance to businesses on this, because I've been doing a good bit of reading, the health experts are saying, many articles and interviews about how do you know if a restaurant is safe? And the guidance has been, are the staff wearing masks? Are there hand sanitizers? Are they cleaning the tables with disinfectant between diners? So I shared this with the group. So some really good questions that there are a couple of questions, and Joel, I'll loop back with you tomorrow, if possible, that I did not have the answer for, but I'm assuming, I think you probably will. You've been on all these weekly calls. But yeah. What was really great at the end of the call yesterday, every single person on the call said, thank you guys so much for doing this with us and helping us through this process. And I think it's really something we're going to continue to do every Tuesday at noon. And they feel the support of the village. Other restaurants will be opening for outdoor dining tomorrow night. I personally want to be present in the village tomorrow evening and just be there and show that level of support. I think it's supposed to be a nice night, so maybe others we can take a walk through whether we eat or dine or not. But there's a lot of appreciation, and so there's a good energy about these meetings. So we're in a good place, and we'll continue to do this.
Excellent. So yeah, we'll catch up tomorrow and get those questions answered for them.
Sure. And we'll talk. I'm going to get us in the email and do all that.
So yeah, I just looked at my watch and realized how we're over 2:15. So we should wrap this up. But I can't not say that yesterday in the village of Tivoli, there was a large demonstration. I heard about it shortly after 10 a.m. The organizers, who I believe were some pretty young people, maybe even high school, I'm not sure, but the village was not notified, nor was our fire department, not the fire chief, not the mayor. So, but we're an agile village, and I'm very pleased that I got downtown, and by 11 o'clock there were many people showing up, and it was essentially a Black Lives Matter demonstration with chalk, and sort of cute since our tradition here in the village is drawing on that road. It was actually quite wonderful that people came into the public way with their chalk and expressed themselves. And they wrote all sorts of things all over Broadway, sidewalks. I quickly closed the road. Got a lot of help from the Department of Public Works to get some trucks and cones in place to keep everyone safe, even though that there was no time to plan for that. It was a reaction. I definitely want to thank the county executive and Commissioner of County Department of Public Works, because I called those gentlemen and let them know that I closed their road. And they certainly, they understood it. We had a nice thank you and exchange at the end of the day. But I'm so pleased that it was a great success. And I wasn't involved. I was some of those critics I mentioned were present, and some of the things written were for my attention. And by me, I mean the village government. I read them, and it's just really great. People were safe. Nobody did anything stupid or dangerous. And it was really a wonderful day in Tivoli. And, I just need to say, because we're meeting as a board, that happened yesterday. And, I wish I had more time to go into more detail, but definitely want to acknowledge it. This is a community where we want people to express themselves. Absolutely. So I think with that, this is a workshop. We don't need to have a motion to adjourn. We took some actions. We didn't open this meeting with a come to order, but I think we will take a vote to adjourn. This workshop is sort of a hybrid. So how about a motion to adjourn this village workshop? Deputy Mayor in the back and Trustee Schneider with a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Panda, for helping us with the technical aspect of these virtual meetings. Good night, all.
Good night, all.